I've got a question for you, Freya. How did you do it? How did your race survive its technical adolescence without destroying yourselves?
The answer to this question is political. We were very careful to weed out imperialism, particularly when political power aligns with corporate wealth. The resulting union leads to short-sighted decisions. What nearly wiped out Steve Van Kirk's layer of time was the corporate political methane conspiracy. The anti-climate change oil companies decided it was okay to control the scientific narrative. By funding climate change research, they asked the researchers to ignore methane's contribution to climate change, because it was too unpredictable and they were paying just for the effects of CO2. They also introduced the global warming equivalent, as a way to confuse the actual effect of methane. The politicians who wanted to stop climate change actually bought into this lowered methane expectation and decided to eliminate it from the narrative, so to make their message that CO2 controls climate change plain. So climate change happened quicker than expected and nobody knew why.
So Freya, how is this example imperialism?
Politicians, on both sides, decided to limit or exclude methane from the discussions, to protect their own corporate interests. It wasn't until the glaciers collapsed, and the ensuing tidal waves wiped out New York, Miami, and Venice, Italy, that they started to recognize their hubris. But by then it was too late and the methane feedback loops made climate change unstoppable.
Even on a small scale, imperialism can have a drastic effect. For example, one minor imperialistic act by the zoning board of Lenox Township near New Haven, Michigan, could cause 90% of the people on the planet to die in 4 years from climate change.
What? No part of that could possibly be true.
To protect their family greenhouses, they denied permits to bring electricity to your new research greenhouse, thus ending practical solar and RC-free foods. If your research in sustainable solar energy had continued, we would not be at the climate tipping point we are right now.
There is no way that you can convince me that things are so bad that 90% of the people on the planet could be dead in 4 years from climate change. The glaciers will take hundreds of years to melt. They are so thick, 1.5 miles thick. And if we look at the pump handle curve O2 over the last 10,000 years, we see every year the amount of CO2 being absorbed by the atmosphere increases. We are just learning to curb our carbon emissions, and if we do so, CO2 levels will drop rapidly. I believe that properly conducted oceanic fish farming could sequester enough CO2 to lead us out of this current spike. And even if we don't do anything, water vapor will limit global warming potential. In the Jurassic era, CO2 levels were higher than 2,000 parts per million, and in the Cambrian era they peaked at 7,000 parts per million, but in neither case did a runaway greenhouse effect kill everything on the planet.
Frank, you're so funny. You think the glaciers need to melt to collapse, and that you could survive 107 degrees Fahrenheit average global temperature as well as the dinosaurs did? Did you know that, when water vapor controls the temperature of the Earth, the clouds are so thick that solar power is less than 10% effective? And with the extreme heat transferability of all that water, the winds die down and wind power becomes ineffective?
We have nuclear power, and air conditioning. All that CO2 in the air will double our plant growth rate. Many greenhouses add CO2 to the air to increase crop yields. Do you think the methane bomb is going to kill us all? Methane is only 20 times more powerful of a greenhouse gas than CO2. 1,800 parts per billion only contributes to less than 10% of global warming. Any methane that melts out of the oceanic hydrates causes an extreme chilling effect of the water blanket on top of the hydrates because of the decompression of the gas as it rises. So, the gigatons of methane that are supposedly waiting to erupt will be self-sealing to only a trickle. That's extreme climate change as you're predicting will be so far in the future that I won't live to see it.
By lying to yourselves about methane, and ignoring the Earth's magma, you don't understand the situation that you're in. Methane is not 20 times as powerful than CO2, it is 200 times as powerful. The 14 parts per billion of methane increase this last year is equal to 2.8 parts per million of CO2. This is approaching the same effect on global warming as CO2 emissions. When the methane has a larger effect than CO2, we lose the ability to control the climate by controlling CO2.
Geothermal heat rising through the Earth's crust melts the glaciers from the bottom. This is why the bottom of most glaciers are exactly at freezing point and there's liquid water underneath all major glaciers. Underwater rivers are formed as this meltwater tries to escape the bottom of the glaciers. Surface meltwater is added to these rivers, resulting in the formation of giant caverns and a labyrinth of ice tunnels. Sometimes these drain tunnels collapse, forming an ice dam. The meltwater builds up behind the ice dam and can float the whole glacier off its foundations, at which point it slides out like a toboggan, causing rapid glacial discharge. Rapid glacial discharge usually causes a tidal wave. That wave can unseat the nearby glaciers, causing a rapid discharge cascade. When the ensuing tidal wave reaches the opposite geographic pole, unseating those glaciers, the resulting sea level rise will change the stresses in the Earth tectonic plates, releasing 100 years of pent-up volcanism, and the ensuing volcanic winter will kill the crops for 2 years, causing 90% of the people on the Earth to starve, and that's how 90% of the people could die in 4 years from climate change.
Most of the time, however, the glaciers collapse just a few at a time, and the high global warming humidity encapsulates the small amount of sulfur dioxide, which is created by just a few volcanoes, which falls out of the sky as rain, resulting in no major crop die-offs.
So, let me get this straight. You think this is what could happen, not what's going to happen. So, what is going to happen to us?
Correct. What's going to happen is, you will see a continuous global temperature rise, howbeit at an increasing rate, as all the feedback loops come into effect. 420 ppm CO2 is a request you made from the planet to raise the temperature 6 degrees centigrade, and to raise sea level 220 feet. It generally takes more than 100 years for the planet to respond to such requests. So, you are seeing the global response from the 1920s. Your most immediate, real threat is sudden glacial discharge. Ice is sticky and falls out all at once. Like drinking a slushie, when you have tipped the cup way back to drain the last bit of flavor out, and suddenly all the ice falls in your face. When glaciers collapse, they collapse all at once. So, sea level rise is not a smooth process, or gradual. So, I'm predicting sudden sea level rise, of between 2 inches and 10 feet, in the next 10 years, followed by minor volcanism. The most ominous thing to watch will be the methane level double and the Arctic sea ice disappear by 2032.
What kind of scientist are you anyway? You, Freya, are definitely not a volcanologist. 100 years of pent-up volcanic activity is not enough to kill so many people. We would have to have an eruption of Yellowstone and Krakatoa volcanoes to get this kind of result. These volcanoes run on cycles of more than 100,000 years. You are just a clickbait alarmist.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm probably wrong about that. I am an anthropologist, and what I know is that in less than 1% of observed alternate realities, human genetic bottlenecking is caused by volcanoes that accompany a methane spike event. What I was trying to do was give an extreme example of imperialism, because that was our main discussion.
What are other sources of human genetic bottlenecking?
Usually it is a combination of war and food shortage that kills most people. My message is that by moving your food producing and your population to higher ground, we can save 90% of your population and most of your technology.
Is most of the imperialistic damage already done, or do we have more to worry about?
Imperialism is always a problem, but if you eliminate it completely, then you are also eliminating capitalism. As in all things, there is a balance to be reached.
So, can we control climate change and stop this runaway methane spike?
That is a complicated subject, and worthy of another video.
Okay, talk to you later, Freya.
Goodbye, Frank.
So, do you think Freya is right? Is there a global methane conspiracy? Will climate change cause volcanism? Will geothermal heat contribute to methane release? Leave comments below, and if you think other people should see this video, then like us on Facebook. Until next time, Frank.